Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Signaling India's engagement with the rest of the world in a multi-dimensional way, Prime Minister Virendra Modi will arrive in the Swiss mountain resort of Davos on Monday. Modi will be the first Indian Prime Minister to attend the World Economic Forum in over 20 years, the last one being H.D. Deve Gowda in 1997. Prime Minister Modi, who will be in Davos for about 24 hours, has a packed schedule. As the world's business and political leaders descend on the town located in the Swiss Alps, Prime Minister Modi will be looking to take the stage, as the Wall Street Journal put it, to secure a more prominent role for India at the big table where the major powers shape the world's rules and regulations. The Time magazine has listed Prime Minister Modi's plenary address as one of the most awaited events at the World Economic Forum. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze India's meteoric rise on the world stage. Joining me on the program today are A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard; Virendra Gupta, former Ambassador; Ajay, Shankar, former Secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Government of India; and S.K. Sarkar, Member, Managing Committee, ASSOCHAM. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador Gupta, I'd like to begin with you, of course. Prime Minister Modi is all set to unveil India at the World Economic Forum. What can we expect?
Well, it's an opportunity for Prime Minister to showcase the reform process, the fact that India is growing very rapidly, and that we have a very attractive business climate. This event is extremely important because Davos has evolved as a very important platform for gathering of business leaders and of course the political leaders. Look at the range of participation at this summit itself. And I think today, more than anything else, I mean, political considerations really feed into economic wherewithals. So I think an opportunity which will help us directly bring in more investment, contribute to our Make in India, create jobs in India, I think is extremely important and is very welcome. I'm surprised that it's after 20 years that we found time at the highest level to. It should have been a long time earlier.
So, Mr. Bhattacharya, it should have been done long time ago, is what the ambassador is suggesting. The first time in over 20 years that an Indian Prime Minister is going for such a big summit. You know. Well, the spotlight is well and truly on him this time around.
World Economic Forum, the Davos Annual Summit, is a talk show, and wherein you need to know the art of talking well. And I don't think we have had many prime ministers. Not that Mr. Deve Gowda was a great talker, but before that Narasimha Rao was a decent talker. But I think after a long time, we have got a prime minister who can talk well. And who can articulate his thoughts very effectively. So, and in a plenary session which is held at the Davos Annual Summit, is very important how the leader talks and addresses the issues. So, apart from what the ambassador talked about, asserting India's position in the global table, I would say that this meeting is going to be very significant because a lot has happened in the country in the last couple of years, and I think it will be an opportunity for him to share those ideas, those issues, those policy formulations that we have seen here. He has liberalized FDI. He has taken steps to resolve the stressed assets issue. He has launched probably the most difficult reform, even though with a lot of glitches, a lot of problems, but the reforms, the GST, goods and services tax, are on the table for people to see. So therefore, and then digitization of the economy. I'm not counting demonetization because I don't think that's a reform. Now, having done all that, it is important for the world's, one of the largest economies to tell the global community that what is going to be my economic agenda, political approach, and particularly when this forum is used by leaders of other countries
Sure.
to assert their position. Like last year, the Chinese president went there and he talked about.
And this was just before Trump's inauguration.
Just before Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
So and so this time it will be Mr. Modi's time to tell the world that what is India up to.
Sure, sure. You know, Mr. Sarkar, Time magazine has said that Modi's plenary address is one of the most awaited events at WEF. What is it that the world's business community would like to hear from Prime Minister Modi?
Well, obviously, what they are looking at is the economic revival of our country, which is very important. And since we are such a large nation with such a massive market, the domestic market is so huge that it's not too difficult to do business in India. So with us going up the ladder also, the ease of doing business, we are 30 places up. So that's another good sign. And then obviously then all the nuclear civil suppliers group agreements that we have signed, which includes the Australian group, the Wassenaar group, and the missile technology control also. So we are moving the right direction. People are looking to us, and since the global economy is today reviving, so obviously they are definitely looking towards India as an area where a lot of business can be done. And an area where I think which is engaging the global attention is skilling for the fourth industrial revolution. And then, of course, we are talking about navigating a multipolar and multi-conceptual world. There are some issues which are going to happen in Davos. There are 8 things which Davos wants us to think about. There are things like effects of the classic privilege. Class privilege. They're going to talk about immigration, harassment, religion, mental health, race, the social stigma which is attached to disability and as also to LGBTQ. Now, Davos is actually an economic and geopolitical, it studies the economic and geopolitical situation. So we shouldn't be surprised by all these areas which they are going to cover. I would also expect Davos to cover cryptocurrency, especially look at blockchain technology, investment opportunities in blockchain technology. Then of course, what happened yesterday was the US government shutdown, which again will have an effect on the economic world.
Right.
Then I think what is very disturbing and which needs immediate attention is the growing gap between the rich and the poor. Yeah, actually, if you look at last year, the reports which have come in now, and ASSOCHAM has been a part of this report, is that it's the top 1% which has actually gained 73% of the wealth, which is the incremental wealth which has happened last year. And even globally, we are actually better because globally it is the 1% has gained about 82%.
Yeah, that's a serious issue that you raised, and that should be addressed as well. Yeah, true.
Yes, and then a question which I think which must be addressed is why are the oil prices going up? So these are issues which need to be. They're going to be 400 sessions in this 48th annual meeting.
So these are your key focus areas that you would look out for.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Let me bring in Mr. Ajay Shankar into the picture now. Mr. Shankar, the largest Indian delegation of 130 people going to the WEF this time around, what is it that we would like to showcase?
I would like to take off from what was said earlier, that Davos is the most prestigious gathering of business leaders of the world and where major political leaders come. It is the only event of its kind. And last year President Xi has gone. So it is only befitting that this year Prime Minister Modi is there in the plenary session. And if we look at the next few decades, and this is a session where business leaders look at big issues, long-term issues, as well as short-term issues, then India is, by all accounts, going to be one of the 3 largest economies of the world in this century. How quickly we become the 3rd is up to us. But if one is looking at the global economy in this 21st century and potential demand as well as potential business, then India is a little ahead of China because we are a little underdeveloped. So for business leaders, India is terribly important if they are looking for the future. And therefore, it is a good opportunity for Prime Minister Modi and his other ministers to be able to convey to business leaders with a degree of confidence that we are a free, open market economy committed to a globalized economic system. We are stable, we will be stable, and that it makes good sense to look at India in the medium and long term as well as the short term as the happening place in the global economy.
Sure.
It's a strong message we can communicate, and I'm sure our leaders will do so.
Okay, great. Strong message, and you're sure that the leaders will communicate that strong message as well. Is it safe to say, Ambassador, that the world is looking towards India at the moment and wants to see what India has to offer to the world, really?
Well, India, as Mr. Shankar pointed out, is already the 5th largest economy in absolute terms, and that 3rd largest in PPP terms. So it's just that we have such a large market and we have so much to offer that what India does or does not do has a very serious impact on the global economy. It determines the trend for how the global economy would progress. So I think it's extremely important. It's very obvious that world will take greater notice of us. And this is an opportunity. In fact, all that has been said, I mean, inclusive growth for our country is far more important than the, the story that could be told only by macroeconomic indicators. But then, before a foreign audience, the idea is to firstly position India on the global high table, not merely at the political agenda, but also on economic agenda. And everybody has said, in fact, one of the BJP leaders, in fact, very famously said that we are not a silent spectator anymore, but we want to be a stakeholder. And I think that is extremely true. The time has come for India to be a stakeholder, and this is an opportunity for India at the highest level to make that point, that India is rapidly reforming, India is responding to the challenge, India is receptive to suggestions that have been made by the international community, and that India can do things which will impact positively on the world economy.
Sure. Mr. Bhattacharya, what has changed in recent times, that India has emerged as a global player and India is being looked at globally as well in very high regard? And also, are the business leaders going to be concerned about issues of bureaucracy and red tapeism?
Well, there's not of recent origin. What has happened is that India has been growing pretty rapidly for the last several years. So it is the cumulative impact of that growth for the last several years that has propelled India into this position of being the 5th largest economy in the world. So naturally, in what India says or India does in the sphere of economic policy or even in the sphere of geopolitics is very, very important. Now, what is special about Davos and what is significant about Davos and the Prime Minister going there and not only addressing the plenary session, but also having a special dinner meeting with almost 130 global CEOs.
There are cultural programs. There's Indian cuisine there.
The important thing is that Davos is not a one-way show. It is not a one-way traffic. So it will be interesting to see that how the Prime Minister addresses the various, of course he will outline the various achievements, his policy priorities, policy initiatives at the forum, but it will be also interesting to see how he addresses the issues that are come up in that plenary session, because the plenary session is not just about the Prime Minister addressing it, but also he is taking questions from the floor. Now, there will be questions about jobs, there will be questions about how effective was demonetization move, how significant is his policy of social inclusion or exclusion and the way we want to see it. So there are many other questions that will come up, and that to my mind will be very, very important, because the foreign investor is very concerned and very, very interested in knowing how the government takes the country's economic policy forward in a manner that growth is not only sustainable, but also takes the fruits of that growth to the largest segment of people across the spectrum.
Sure. Sure. Mr. Sarkar, you know, a question that I asked Mr. Bhattacharya as well, red tapeism, do you believe that that is an issue that the global investors are going to be worried about?
Well, it does remain an issue. It is not that we, but obviously it is diluted quite a bit now. So it would not be a major hurdle for doing business in India. But yes, there are some issues which need to be further diluted. I suppose with time things will improve. And I feel, you see, that there's a feeling, rightly or wrongly, that the biggest economies actually dictate all the rules and regulations. So that's where India is at a little disadvantage, because it's not one of the bigger economies as yet. I mean, of course, in absolute terms, it is the third largest. But when you look at India's economy as such, it's not that big, and because we do not have we are still quite behind the world. And then, of course, there are the ground realities which we must not forget. Well, one is I always felt that fiscal deficit since the budget is around the corner, fiscal deficit is looked at as one of the very important benchmarks. I somehow feel that the outcomes of your economic activity is more important than the fiscal deficit. Then you have, we talk about logistics. Our costs are pretty high. We go up to something like 14% of the sale value, whereas globally it's about 6%. Yes, the present government is doing a lot in roads, waterways. They are even ports, so they are doing a lot. But right now, these are bottlenecks in the sense that it takes away the competitiveness of our country right now. Then I think one very disturbing fact was the trade deficit of December 2017, wherein we were 14 billion minus. And that really is a figure which it worries me more, because it means that the imports which took place, other than oil, of course, oil and electronics, the imports were actually replacing the domestic supplies. So it's not that the domestic supplies are in a position they are not on the uptick right now. So that needs to be corrected. And of course, the jobless growth remains a huge hurdle which needs to be crossed. Because unless we provide jobs...
No, but to an interview to a private channel, the Prime Minister himself addressed that issue and said that that is not true, but those are lies being spread by some people in the community, is what he suggested. He said that the EPF accounts, the number of EPF accounts that have been created alone shows that there are jobs being created in this country.
Well, I would only say to that is that, you see, we have an informal economy which is about 90%. And as the informal economy formalizes, so that's how the EPO account is going up. So it's not just because the jobs are being created to the extent that is required for a vibrant economy like ours. So I would still say that, I'm not saying that jobs are not being created at all, but the point here is that I need to engage the youth in my growth program. And I can do that only when I am in a position to create more and more jobs.
So not at the level at which you would be satisfied with, is what you're suggesting. Okay.
And why should anybody be satisfied? I mean, I think in economic growth, you must always be in search of excellence.
Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, let me move on now. You know, Mr. Shankar, is India ready, you know, as a destination for global investments to start pouring in? Can we deliver on that front as well?
I think we are already delivering. FDI into India has been growing quite rapidly. I think we are one of the largest destinations for FDI. And in terms of investor perception, we are either number 1 or number 2 across the world. So we are seen as a very attractive investment destination. And I think the whole effort at Davos would be to convey the strengths of India and its potential and its credibility as an investment destination. And on all these accounts, we are very, very strong. So I think we sometimes underestimate our attractiveness as an investment destination, and also not adequately recognize the extent to which FDI is already flowing into the country.
Sure. Okay, time now for quick closing comments from all my guests, starting with you, Ambassador. Let's talk about the theme. You know, would you say that the theme is apt, looking at how the global scenario is at this point in time? Because everyone is looking internally. America is saying America first. Same is the situation in many countries in Europe. The theme this time around is creating a shared future in a fractured world.
Well, the world is, I don't agree that it's a fractured world. Countries are always competing for economic resources. And I think they're not fighting, there is competition. So in that sense, it's a very healthy environment that we are living in today. And the very fact, in fact, the countries are not kind of a balance of power or total division. Every country is trying to optimize its relations with all the other countries. So I think in that spirit, really, Prime Minister is opening our economy, linking India to the world, and optimizing India's capacity to contribute, which he has an opportunity to showcase most beautifully.
Sure. Mr. Bhattacharya, what would you like India to take away from Davos?
Well, my sense is that the message that has gone out from India to the world, and which will go out most likely in Davos, is that India is open for doing business even more than it ever was. And the manner in which the policies have been liberalized, changed, tweaked, even the ground results of the World Bank's ease of doing business index showing India's improvement. But I think the fine print of that, all that message would be that to what extent the ecosystem within the country is also correspondingly developed in the areas of particularly infrastructure. You mentioned about the red tape and bureaucracy, and social infrastructure in particular, which you're talking about education, talking about healthcare, and talking about water. Now, these are the areas that create a very positive ecosystem to complement the kind of policy liberalization that you have made, you have introduced to invite foreign investment. So while India is open to doing business, but the real takeaway would be what message the Prime Minister can give to the world, that we are not just open to doing business, we are open to doing business in a manner that you find doing business in this country far more better, far more productive, far more remunerative, and far more satisfying, not just from the economic infrastructure point of view, but also from the social infrastructure point of view.
Sure. Mr. Sarkar, the WEF this time around will see the highest number of women participation as well. Even at GES 2017, we saw the focus being on women entrepreneurs. So is the focus now shifting towards empowering the women?
Yes, but there's a focus on sexual harassment also. So that's an issue which is also being taken up in Davos. So, and that is an area which will also be of great. I think women have a very large role to play in the affairs of the world, and in fact, their presence itself in a room, in a boardroom, makes a lot of difference to what is transacted at that particular board meeting. So they have a very important role to play, and I would welcome that step, that ladies definitely must come forward and be part of that, be part of the global economic activities. What disturbs me as a whole is we seem to be especially the bigger economies are today moving towards bilateralism from multilateralism. And that I think America is a great example over there, which is actually moving towards that. That is an area. Then Trump walking out of TPP. So all these things which are happening today may need to be reversed. And I think Modi, our Prime Minister, has to play a major role over there.
Talking about a major role, a quick closing comment, Mr. Shankar, on what role do you see India playing on the global stage?
As a responsible player, who's a large player, offers the most exciting business prospects in the coming decades. And each one of our weaknesses, and there are weaknesses, are business opportunities for Indian business as well as business in the rest of the world. So we have to convey a degree of commitment to overcoming our challenges and being a very credible place to do business and the largest market in the coming decades.
Okay, all right then. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective. For us, that's it from me. See you again next time.